Welcome to Women Empower Active, an initiative started by UR Sportswear to empower women to find their own active adventure. I'm your host, Jacalyn Gross. Today, we're excited to share the empowering journey of Julie McKelvey. Julie caught the mountaineering bug and found herself transformed while summiting Mount Fuji, sparking a passion that led her to conquer the 7 summits, including Mount Everest. But her adventures aren't just about reaching new heights. Through her initiative, Summit for Sound, she raised over $250,000 for the Miracle Ear Foundation, helping countless individuals access vital hearing aids. Julie's story is a powerful testament to resilience, purpose, and the belief that every summit, whether a mountain or personal challenge, is a victory worth celebrating. Okay, let's get into it. How did you start being an active person? Did somebody inspire you? Like, how did that begin for you?
Thanks for having me, first of all. It goes kind of way back. I was never athletic and dabbled in some sports early in high school. But I became a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic. And so the last thing I was doing was anything athletic or exercise related. That started in high school and got worse through college. And then after college, it got really bad. And I hit my bottom, thank God, through grace, power greater than me, for sure. And I got sober. So I just celebrated 29 years sober.
Good
It's a
job.
huge part of my life, and I'm helping other women and all of that. And so my life completely changed. And I was with my dad. My dad had done like these crazy, he climbed Kilimanjaro and he had climbed Mount Elbrus, and he did this marathon to Sablis, which is a 150-mile race through the Gobi Desert. And he was doing this stuff, and we were, I was like, I wasn't really paying much attention. I just was like, he's off on some other crazy thing. And then I had him over for dinner in 2016, and he said, I think I have one more mountain left in me, and I want you to do it with me. And he and we were working together. I joined his company and then ended up buying it from him. But we were estranged for a really long time. And then when we got back together, it was all about work. And so I just was like, I don't know anything about climbing. Like, what do you mean? He's like, well, go to Japan and climb Mount Fuji. It's the highest peak in Japan, and you can totally do it. And so I just said yes, because I knew it would be a cool experience with my dad, didn't know how to train, didn't know anything. Took my oldest son, who was 12 at the time, with me, and we went to Japan, and we started up this mountain. And my dad had to turn around because his balance was not good. And Jacob and I continued up with the guide to the summit, but you stop overnight at this hut in the middle of nowhere. I'm totally disconnected from my life for the first time ever. And then they come wake you up, and you go outside, and we're above the clouds at this point, and I see the sunrise above the clouds.
Yeah.
And I'm standing out there with Jacob, and I just start weeping, and something shifted in me. It was very powerful. It was very spiritual. And I was the most quiet and in tune with myself at that moment than I had ever been. I'm very go, type A, achieve, more, all that. And I was super calm, and it was beautiful. And then, the next day we summited and we got down, and I was like, I want more of this, whatever this is, And so I found a guide to take me to Kilimanjaro. I'd never heard of the 7 summits at this point. Got some girlfriends together. We go to Kilimanjaro, which is the highest peak in Africa. It's over 19,000 feet. It's, significant altitude. And my guide, Ben, says to me, before we had even, it was on the way up, you stay at these camps, and you're acclimatizing, so you're going super slow. And he says to me, you should think about the 7 summits. You could totally do it. And I was like, what is that? I never heard of that. He goes, well, you're on one. And I was like, okay. He said, it's the highest peak on each continent in the world, and very few people and especially very few women have ever done it. And I think you could do it. And I was like, I need to see if I can get to the top of this one,
Yeah.
and I did, and had an incredible experience. Same thing. The sun's coming up on summit night, and I just feel this amazing power that I'd never felt again. And so I get down and we come home and I start Googling climbing the seven summits. What does this mean? And there's a company called Climbing the Seven Summits. And I reach out and I call and I talked to this guy, Mike, who owns the company, and it went from there.
So when you started out, the first time you kind of didn't really know what you were getting yourself into, like how can you go into like any struggles that you were having climbing, or did you really have like a training block before you went and climbed that first mountain, Mount Fuji?
No,
No.
since I got sober, I've been doing strength training, which I love.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days a week, but no cardio. I mean, I was not interested in cardio. I hated it. And
Mhm.
so all I knew how to do was go to the local ski hill and go up and down. That's all I did. And I didn't do it that much. And my son Jacob didn't, I think he went once.
Yeah.
So totally unprepared, like I was strong, but not
Mhm.
cardiovascular strong. And for Kilimanjaro, it was kind of the same thing. I did more of it, and I did it with a pack on.
Yep.
And I started walking, but that mountain was tough. I mean, it's really hard to breathe up there. And it impacts you in ways I had no idea. Altitude.
Yeah.
And then I went through the next mountain, which was Mike said to me, the owner of Climbing Seven Summits, he's like, well, the next thing you should do is Mount Elbrus in Russia. I was like, okay, I'm going to Russia now. So you have this whole process. You have to get a visa to get in, and all these flights to get there. And I landed in Russia, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know anyone. Like
Yeah.
I know no one. And there's a team of people, and I meet them, and I meet Mike, the owner, and we saw St. Petersburg, which was incredible, and then we headed into the mountain, and that was snow. So that was the first time I had ever had climbing boots on,
Wow.
crampons on my feet.
Mhm.
I was on a rope. I had to learn how to self-arrest, which, if you start falling down, you need to be able to stop yourself,
Yes.
so you don't die. And there's crevasses and all this stuff.
Mhm.
I had learned all these skills and was so grateful that I was in a group of people that there was some super experienced people, but there was also people just like me that had no idea what they were doing. So
Yeah.
I kind of hung out with them, and we figured it out, and summited that peak. And it was you always leave at night when it's the coldest, because that's when it's the safest, and the crevasses aren't as dangerous. And super difficult summit night. I still didn't have any idea what training, what I was doing, or nutrition, or hydration, or recovery. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I just went up and just got to the top and had an incredible experience. And then it was like, okay, what's next? And I'm getting closer, and so the next thing was I went to Everest Base Camp, and I just do the trek to base camp. Um, and went with some friends and saw Nepal for the first time. And you're trekking through these villages, and you're staying in these tea houses, and these yaks are around you. And uh, you stop at these temples, and you get blessed by monks, and like it was like, what? This is incredible! Like,
Yeah.
this is so awesome.
Yeah.
And we finally get to base camp, and it was in the fall, so none of the Everest stuff was going on. There was nothing, no tents or anything there.
Mhm.
But I come around this corner and I see Everest for the first time, and I just start like, I lost it. I just started crying. I'm like, what is the deal with this mountain in me?
Yeah.
Like, but I also knew, and I still had so far to go.
Mhm.
But I was like, I'm supposed to climb this thing. I don't understand why. And B, I'm going to. And I don't know how, but I made up my mind that I was going to do it. And so I got home, and then the next mountain was Aconcagua in Argentina. And that's 23,000 feet. And so in order to climb Everest, you have to get you have to check the box of climbing that high without oxygen before you're even accepted onto an Everest expedition with
Wow.
a legitimate company anyway. So
Okay.
there's all these climbs require a resume. So you can't just, go say, I'm going to go climb Everest. And you get to like 21,000 feet on summit night. And I'm with a friend of mine and Ben, this guy, Ben from Kilimanjaro was with
Yeah.
me. And all these guides are having a conversation with their clients at this place called The Cave. And the guide walks up to us, this Argentine guy named Tito, and he was such a hard ass. And he said, "Do you have what it takes to get to the summit and back?" And he says this to my friend first, and my friend's like, "Nope, I'm out." I'm like, "What? You're out?" He was sick the whole night before, and it was super hard.
Hmm.
And he looks at me and I said, yes. And the whole time I'm like, I have no idea what's up there or what it entails.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say yes and hope for the best. And we get to the top and I get super sick with altitude sickness. And I got double vision and I'm weak and we're at the summit taking the pictures, and I know it's not good, and the weather's closing in, and all, I mean, not a good situation at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I walk over to Tito and I said, I know what I told you down there, but I don't know, I don't think I can get down. And he starts yelling at me, what? And in Argentina, I'm like, can we just focus on the solution? Like,
Yeah.
let's get down. And so I had to be short roped. They had put oxygen on me to get me down, super steep, exposed, all the things.
Yeah.
But I got down and it worked out. Each one of these, I learned more and more. Each one of these, I'm not sure at all that I can do it.
Hmm.
And I keep going and it's working out pretty much. I
Yeah.
mean, like,
Yeah.
uh,
Like how are you mentally going to the mountain like the day before or whatever? Like what are you thinking?
I mean, the whole thing changed for me. It changed from checking the box and have to get to the summit to a space where will the mountain allow me up there? And that
Hmm.
sounds kind of weird, but I will do I did everything that I could
Hmm.
physically, mentally, spiritually, everything before I got there. So I showed up prepared because I had seen all these people showing up like really like don't have the right gear, not trained, can't put a heavy pack on. And I'm like, I am not gonna because once you show up on the mountain, there's all these things out of your control. There's weather. I mean, it is a huge thing. Getting sick is a huge thing when you're in these different countries. And so I made up my mind so I got to a place, it was really after Aconcagua because I was like, I need to figure out this training thing. Like, because I was suffering so badly. And I was like, and I was seeing other people, and no matter what you do, there's suffering, which is part of the awesomeness of it, because that's where you grow.
Yeah.
But I was suffering to the point of I wasn't really enjoying it as much as I could have. And I knew it. And so I hired a coach, which changed everything for me. So, was a lot of people ask me, was there fear? Yeah, I mean, all the time. I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be here. I'm too old. What do people think of me? I'm not fast enough. I'm not, whatever, all the things. And every single time I've had to work through that and I've had to work that while I'm on the climb. And I got better at it, but I mean, it still happened in a big way on Everest because so much stuff happened over there. But I've had to work through it. I've had to lean on, whoever I could that I trusted on that trip, whoever I met. Because there's people that show up on the team that are negative, and I don't want to, I'm like, I got to separate myself from that. They're complainers,
Yep.
like it's hard for everyone. Like, let's
Yep.
just get off that, like it's like you're not unique. So I tried to surround myself with positive people and find people that I could be vulnerable with in that situation, strangers.
Hmm.
And they showed up for me, and I'm really close friends with a lot of them today. And they live in all different parts of the world. And I prayed a lot and I tried to get myself in a space through meditation and breathing in the tent where I could, remind myself that I deserve to be there, that I've done the work to be there. And all of us look different. We all come in a different package for a reason, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and I just kept saying, try to be where my feet are. It's a big thing with me. Like when I look back or when I look forward, I have no control.
Mhm.
All I have control over is right now in this moment, wherever I am, and to show up as the best version of myself. And thankfully, most of that fear stuff got flushed out pretty early in most of the expeditions, where once I got higher, I was like, all right, I think this is going to happen. And now we wait for weather. Now we make sure I don't get sick. Now I need to do a lot of self-care, which is a big piece of this. You've got to make sure you're hydrated. You got to make sure you're eating. You got to make sure you're, basic stuff. Everything's more difficult at altitude. I mean, everything. Sorry, I feel like I got off track.
No, that's okay. What is it? It's just great. Let's stay off track. What does it feel like at altitude? Like, what does your body feel like?
It feels like you're breathing through a straw, first of all,
Okay.
and you have to move very slowly. Um, so on all of these, you have to acclimatize, and your body has to build red blood cells to deal with the higher altitude. And the way you do that is you climb high and you sleep low. So you do rotation. So you climb to camp one and then you come back down to base camp for a couple of days. Then you go to camp two and you come back down at three and come back down. And then there's the summit push. So that's why it takes so long. These expeditions take so long. You're not in your right mind to make decisions easily, but you don't realize it when you're in it. It feels like it's kind of normal, but it's really not at all normal. And you lose your appetite, which is a problem. You have to force yourself to eat because you have to have the strength to keep going.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like being in a different world. I mean, especially Everest. It's like I think I'm on the moon right now. I don't know what's happening. Thank God there was people like telling me what to do and when to do it because I very much understand now why they call it the death zone. Like nobody should be up there.
Mhm.
But as I kept going, um, I got better at managing that and recognizing when it was happening and um, taking better care of myself in terms of hydration is a huge, huge, huge thing. And it's the last thing you want to do when it's freezing cold and you're in a tent is drink anything. You just want to go to sleep. So yeah, so then was Aconcagua, and so next was Denali. So I'm progressing pretty well, and I gave myself a 5-year timeline, which was I think it's average, but it's pretty aggressive because you've got COVID in there, and that threw everything off, and
Yep.
um, but that was my timeline because I did my first one when I was 50. Kilimanjaro, I was 50. And I wanted to do them all by the time I was 55. And so Denali was next, and Denali and Everest are considered the hardest two. And Denali is in Alaska. It's 20,000 feet. But the difference with that one is you have to carry all of your own stuff. You carry your gear, you carry the tent, you carry the food, you carry everything.
Mhm.
So you have a sled that you pull behind you that has, I don't know, 50, 70 pounds. And then you have a backpack on that's at least 50, if not 70 pounds. So and you are on steep terrain, on snow with crampons and crevasses and all the things, and you have all this weight, and there's sled dragging you, and super difficult. Then you finally get to the camp, and now you got to set up the whole camp. Like some of these other mountains, you get to the camp and there's already tents magically.
Yeah.
Like somebody carried my stuff magically.
Mhm.
Denali very different and very low success rate, horrible weather, freezing cold. I think it's like a 20% success rate on that one. Like it's super, super tough. And
Mhm.
so I got this coach, Mark, who changed my life. And I started to learn about training and aerobic threshold and I found out that most of the training is in heart rate zone 2, which so it doesn't, because my version, like everything is just, I got to go to the death, on
Yeah.
everything. And I thought that's what the training was going to be.
Mhm.
And it is a couple days a week. It's horrible. Today was one of them. But um, but most of the time you're in a lower heart rate zone. And the reason is because when you're in altitude, your heart rate cannot go high.
Oh,
It's not possible. So you want to train in the zone of the heart rate that you're going to be in most of the time, which is zone two. And I was like, that is the best news I've heard this whole time. Like, I can totally do this. And that's how you build endurance, which is this is an endurance sport. You need to be able to go back to back long days over a long period of time and still recover. And so I learned about all that, and there's an app, and I get a chest strap and a heart rate monitor, a Garmin, and every workout I do is uploaded, and he's analyzing it, and he's figuring out what the next day is, and total game changer. My fitness like shot through the roof within 6 months, and
awesome.
I was able to do these long sessions up on my local training mountain that I couldn't believe I could go for 5, 6, 7 hours straight. Like hard, but manageable. And then 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for Denali on my hardest, and that for Denali you got to train with a 70-pound pack on your back. Which is hard going uphill. And it was summer. I was coming down my last loop for the day, and I slipped on scree and I wiped out, and my foot turned up underneath me, and I knew it was bad. And I could feel it blowing up, and got home and I'm freaking out like, oh my God. I didn't get an x-ray because I didn't want to know. And I didn't want that on the record, but I had a feeling. And I had physical therapists looking at it remotely, and oh, we think it's just sprained. Cool, awesome, ice it. Didn't tell the guide, didn't tell my team anything. I was just like, I have got to try. And I get over there, and it's I'm with a team I had never met, um, I'm managing it. I'm icing it down at night, and the team is falling apart. Like people are dropping off like flies. Like some of these people couldn't even lift the pack up to put it on their back. And I'm like, oh my God, okay.
Yeah.
Even with a bad foot, I'm better off than these people. So
Yeah.
so it ends up being me and this guy, David Morgan, who had just climbed Everest, and the guides. And we start up on the steep stuff about, I don't know, 5 days in, 6 days in, and I can't turn my foot, and I know it. And the guide's ahead of me, David's behind me. We're on this rope. We're on, at least 45-degree terrain, and they're both watching me like, what in the heck? Have you never done this? Like, kind of thing. And I'm like, no, I just got to get this worked out. And then we get up to this place called Windy Corner, and the guy calls it. And he's like, what's going on with your foot? And I tell him, I'm like, look, I thought it was fine, and apparently it's not. He's like, no, it's not at all. And this is super dangerous up above us. And I'm calling it. You got to go down. And I was fighting with him and upset and crying and all the things. And turns out that that was one of the greatest gifts of this whole journey for me. I needed to fail, even though it was, because of a fall. I needed to have that experience. I hadn't had that yet. I had achieved everything that I had said I was going to do. And, I was tied to the fundraiser for the Miracle Foundation. And so all these people were, it was very public and all that. And so just the humiliation, all the stuff that you feel. And so got down, I had it x-rayed, it was broken. It was broken the whole time. The doctor was like, yeah, it's definitely been broken for at least 3 weeks. So that was,
Wow.
so the fact that I got that high with a broken foot, I was like, okay, I feel better now. Like, so I was in the boot and all of that. And, as soon as I got cleared, I started training again. And what was next? Antarctica was next. And just amazing place. Like, as I was going through this, I'm like, how do I get to do this? Like, what a privilege,
Yeah.
like it's hard, and there's all these obstacles and all the things, and my family's so supportive, and I'm teaching my kids, and I don't even realize I'm teaching them.
Yeah.
My youngest Jackson on Sundays was my long day on the mountain for training. And he's all curled up on my couch here in my office and under a blanket. And I'm getting ready to leave him for like 7 hours, and he would say things to me like, remember why you started. And that became our like theme that he said to me every Sunday. Like, you've got this mom. There was nobody was getting upset because where's mom? It was nothing but support. I'm so fortunate. My husband has been a stay-at-home dad since I got pregnant, and I ran the business full time, and I worked all the time. And so now all of a sudden I've got kids and husband and working 75 to 80 hours a week to build the company, and now I'm going to go do this. And it was a lot. I mean, I had to get really efficient with my time, and I had to say no to a lot of people. And some of my girlfriends, unfortunately, didn't hang with me through that. And I just had to say something's got to go, and it can't be my family, and it can't be the business, and it can't be my recovery. So whatever's left is going because I'm training 20 hours a week or whatever with all the recovery stuff, and started to see a bigger picture of what was happening here. I'm supposed to do this, and I'll figure out why later, but I knew I was supposed to do it. And so then went to Antarctica, and I mean, just you fly on this plane and you land on the blue ice and in the middle of Antarctica, and like,
wow,
absolutely beautiful. So few people have been there. And I had a new team of people that I met there too, that I'm super close with now. And when you go through these experiences with people, you really bond with them. Like, it's pretty special because you're suffering together.
Yeah.
And on that one, it was super cold. I mean, that was the thing. It was just so cold. And you take this little puddle jumper kind of plane into base camp. And I met Tendy, my Everest guide. I met him. He was on the Vincent team, and I was pretty sure I was going to ask him or reserve him for Everest. He's super hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
So I got right behind him on the rope, and right behind him, I'm like, Tendy,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, glue my. And he's a Sherpa, and he's Buddhist, and he's calm, and he's, I mean, unbelievably technically competent in climbing the highest peaks in the world, but the most kind, gentle, beautiful soul. And I fell in love with him on this spiritual level immediately. And I knew he was going to take me to the top of the world. I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we finish that climb, we get back down to base camp, then we get snowed in. So we're stuck at base camp in this big tent. There's a dome tent, like where they feed you and stuff. And then you have these individual tents, and it is freezing, and the snowstorms are coming in, and the planes can't come get us, and we're stuck there for a week. No communication, no, barely enough food to last that long. We had to.
Wow.
The team's cache, meaning they dig a hole in the snow or the ice,
Mm-hmm.
and cache food there, and so that there's emergency supplies for anybody who needs them. And then they put these big wands in, and they stay there all winter. You can only climb most of these mountains in very specific time frames during the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the whole process it was mind blowing. They're pulling this stuff out of the ice that had been there for a year. Like, so we're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I don't
I
remember
won't
what
go
it
bad.
was. Yeah, like, we're okay. We're surviving here. And
Yeah.
you realize how little you actually need,
Mm-hmm.
like, you just don't need that much to survive and be happy. I mean, it's very simple living when you're on these expeditions. You're not showering, you're not, none of that.
Mm-hmm.
You're just present, and trying to stay warm most of the time, and developing these intense relationships with other people in the same situation. And we're all like a week off schedule, and there's stuff going on at home, and these are all like professional people, and none of us, we were all like very accepting of the situation. Like, it was cool.
Yeah. You kind of have to be in that situation because it's like there's nothing, you can't control the weather. They
No.
kind of have to like release the control
Yeah.
to the
And
elements.
that's been hard for me in my life. I want to control everything. I mean, and in my business, the company was doing better and better. And the first time I went away, Fuji, I wasn't off the grid that long, but Kilimanjaro, I was off the grid for, a couple of weeks. Nobody could get me. And, I've got 40 retail offices across the state, and you've got over 100 employees, and I had my hands in everything, everything.
Mhm.
I hired these amazing people and I wouldn't fully turn over the position to them. That was who I was. And I went to Kilimanjaro and I came back and the company was doing better than when I left. And I was like, oh my God. And that's when I knew I could keep going. I'm like, okay, this is when I get out of the way, things get better. It's a little
Yeah.
hard to accept. Um, but another huge lesson for me, like
Yeah.
um, in control, and letting go and surrendering and all those things for me, I have to learn over and over and over again. It's not a one-shot deal. I wish it were, but so then it was time to go back to Denali, and these were like back to back to back every 6 months. And I get home, I recover for a couple weeks, and when you get home, it's really like I remember after Kilimanjaro, I just stood and like turned the faucet on and off and on and off because to get water is this major process in these
Mhm.
mountains, like you've got to filter it. And, when you're in the snow, you've got to melt snow, which
Yeah.
takes forever. So it takes forever just to get like a liter of water. So you're super appreciative of the water once you get it. It's like,
Yeah.
and you're careful with it and you're like all the things with it. Like,
Mhm.
so when I got home, I'm like, wow, like I can't even, I'm so grateful. It brought so much gratitude to me and realization of how good we have it, really. But I would come home and recover, which, was a week or two, maybe 10 days, and then I would start training again. And I met somebody in Russia, um, this father-daughter that were doing the seven summits, and they had just done Everest. And this girl, Marika, was 15 years old, and she was going for the world record of the youngest to climb the seven summits. And Everest was like number 6, I think.
Mhm.
And her dad was an attorney and super successful guy. They live in Kosovo. I mean, amazing people.
Mhm.
And we were at breakfast one morning after the climb when we were waiting to get out. And I said, look, we're the same age. Like, what do you think about me doing this? He's like, you totally can. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm like, tell me. You stay in training mode and you do them back to back to the best of your ability with the business and the family and all the other stuff. And I hung on to that. He's like, don't let yourself, once you get out of training mode, then you got to build back up. So I just stayed at a pretty high fitness level, which meant a lot of recovery, a lot of sleep, all the things. And anyway, so then it's time to go back to Denali. And, I at least knew what I was walking into. I was like, okay, this is what this looks like. This is what this feels like. I don't know what it feels like above this point, but
Mhm.
all kinds of obstacles with the guy that was going to take me, fell out, got injured. And my coach, Mark, he guided on Denali 17 years. So he's like the guy for Denali. But he retired from Denali. And he calls me and he said, your guide's injured. And he's like, I have it figured out. I'm going to go. I'm going to guide you. I was like, what? You're going back? And he goes, only for you, but yes. And I'm so psyched because
Yeah.
I know him. We have this relationship. I trust him. He knows the mountain. We get over there and he's diagnosed with COVID. And I'm like,
Oh
okay,
no.
who's taking me up this thing?
Yeah.
So the owner of the climbing company also does expeditions, and his client had just something happened, and he's available suddenly. The guy that owns the climbing company
Yeah.
that is in charge of Denali, and so he takes me up with this other guy, and I was super strong and fast, and we got to the summit in 9 days, which is like unheard of.
Wow.
We moved fast and we moved light, and it was absolutely incredible up there. I hope I never need to go back there for any reason in my entire life. That thing, God, was it hard.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of people die on Denali.
Oh.
And there was helicopter rescues. I mean, lots of people die every year over there. But they bring the bodies out, to my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah. A good friend of mine who I met in Ecuador, I went over to Ecuador to do some training, and I met her, and we stayed in touch. And beautiful New York fashion queen, like, but she got down and dirty in the mountains. I mean, we were so similar. And she passed away last year. And her body is still on this mountain in China. She did the 7 summits, and then the next thing is to do the 14 peaks, which is the 14 highest mountains, 14 mountains over 8,000 meters, which is like 26,000 feet. So oxygen required on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Super hard, super dangerous. And Shishapangma in China was her 14th mountain, and she got to within 200 feet of the summit and got killed by an avalanche. And her body's still up there. So there's a recovery effort happening actually right now. And they're trying to find her and the guide and bring them down. So, that really hit home. The last time I saw her was on Everest. I saw her in the ice fall, and we hugged, and then she died 3 months later. So yeah, it started to get real with Denali in terms of like the danger of this. And so I was even more vigilant about training. I was even more vigilant about the decisions that went into who was taking me up these things.
I did want to ask about that. Like, how are you choosing who you're going up the mountain with? Like, how are you choosing your
Well,
team?
the initial at the beginning, it was just the teams. And
Yeah.
then, Denali, I just got super lucky. And, that was a private trip though. And that's the way I wanted to do it. Because I could, and because I wanted to minimize issues with teammates. And as you get higher and it gets harder, then there's stuff happens with people, and it takes the guides attention. I was like, okay, is there another way to do this? And then when I found out there was another way, I was like, yeah, I'm all in for that. That's the way I want to do this. Um, so, then Everest is next. And I had signed up with Tendi right after Antarctica. So I had signed up with him almost 2 years before Everest. And we had a Zoom call, and it reinforced what I knew when I met him. And he said, yeah, I'll take you up. And so on Everest, there's teams within the Climbing the Seven Summits community, which is one, company out of a bunch that do Everest. There's, a Western guided team and a Sherpa guided team. And then there's, private trips, but you're all kind of together. Yeah, so Everest, you do the same Everest base camp trek that I had done. So I knew the deal with that. And, you stay at tea houses along the way. And then you climb this peak, La Vache, which I had already climbed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 20,000-foot peak. It was super difficult the first time I did it. And I did it again, and I'm with Tendi, but I start getting sick. And on Everest, it's not a question of if you're going to get sick, it's when. So you're going into these tea houses that are not necessarily all sanitary, and you're around a lot of people, and the viruses spread like wildfire over there. And so I start getting sick, and I'm like, oh, it's just the cold. It's not, I'm treating it with whatever over-the-counter stuff I brought, and I'm coughing, and everybody coughs. You get this thing called the Kumbu cough, which happens at altitude and in that environment, and everybody's coughing, but it's just part of the deal. But it's not really getting better. And I finally get to base camp, and I'm like, I go to the Everest base camp has a medical tent with doctors in it. It's pretty awesome. They can't do a lot, but they can at least do some things. And Penny and I went because he was worried about me, and they're like, no, you're fine. It's just, it's just the Kumbu cough. Just keep taking the over-counter stuff. And I'm like, okay. So we start up to Camp 1 on our first rotation and through the ice fall. It takes 5 hours generally if you're doing good to get through that thing. And it's super technical and so dangerous. It's this massive block of ice that's moving and creating these crevasses that at the beginning of the season aren't that big, but at the end of the season, they're huge. So at the beginning of the season, there might be one ladder to cross the crevasse. And by the end, it's like 4 ladders tied together. So there's these incredible Sherpa called the ice fall doctors, and they're very carefully chosen each year who's going to be the ice fall doctor. They figure out the route through the ice fall. They place the ladders, they manage the ladders, they go in and fix the routes. But there's these huge seracs, which is our big chunks of ice that are hanging over you that could fall on you, that have fallen on people and killed them immediately.
Mhm.
So you gotta move quickly through this thing. And I'm coughing and we're getting higher, and physically I'm doing okay, but I'm coughing like crazy. And Tendy's listening to me. And in my head, we were like 3/4 of the way to Camp One. And in my head, I'm like, I just gotta get to Camp One and then we'll deal with it. I'm not going back through this thing. There's no way right now. Because I was starting to feel bad. Then I start coughing up blood, and Tendy's like, we're going down. And we turn around and I start walking, and I'm so weak. And he's got to call down to base camp, and Sherpa had to bring oxygen up for me just to get me back down to base camp. And I get to base camp and I'm in horrible shape. And the medical people come to my tent because I can no longer, even walk really. And they're like, we got to get you to the hospital immediately. And you have to wait for the weather to the helicopter to come get you. The weather closes in. I'm on oxygen in the tent for a couple days. Finally, the helicopter gets me out, takes me down, flies me to Kathmandu. Ambulance picks me up on the tarmac, and I go into the hospital, and they're taking X-rays and doing all the things. And I got incredible treatment over there. I couldn't believe how good it was and how fast it was. And they're like, you've got this full-blown AMS and this lung infection, and this does not look good for you to go back. But it's a 2-month expedition, and this was early April that this happened.
Mhm.
So Mike Hamill, the owner of the company, came into my tent, and I hung on to this the whole time. And he said, this happened to me. The exact same thing happened to me. I had to go to the hospital. I was able to come back and still summit. You have time. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Awesome. Because I don't know anything at this point. I'm just like, what? I'm going to the hospital? Like the rest of my team's getting ready to like go on their summit push. I stayed in the hospital 2 nights, and the doctors are like, this doesn't look good. And I said, what can I do? Because I'm not going home.
Mhm.
So you can go check into a hotel for however long it takes and get your strength back. And I'd lost a bunch of weight by then. I was super, weak. And they're like, eat, hydrate, and sleep. Just do those 3 things for like 5 days and come back every day. And we'll do a new X-ray. And they did. No, no, no. And then we finally get to day 7, day 6, maybe. And the he knows I'm serious. Like, I think most people would
Yeah.
go home at that point. And I'm like, look, I got everything on the line. I've worked for 5 years to get to this. And I'm not going to do it if my life's on the line, but there's any chance, yeah, I'm going.
Mhm.
He's like, I'll clear you, but there's a 60% chance that this infection is going to come right back as soon as you go into altitude again. And I'm like, I looked right at the guy and I said, but there's a 40% chance it won't. And he was like, oh God, I know who I'm dealing with. I should have said there's an 80% chance this chick is crazy. So we get to day 7 and of me being out of altitude, and that's a significant number because that's when you start to lose the acclimatization. I had spent 6 weeks acclimatizing, right? And so you lose it all, and unless you get back up there quickly. And we get to day 7, and I'm psyched, and I can fly to base camp. Weather closes in, can't get to base camp. I'm like, so then they can't fly me to base camp. So now I've got to trek back up. So I flew up like halfway. Tendy walked down to meet me, and we hung out like midway. I don't know what the altitude was, but it was in the same tea house that I first got sick in. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like, get me out of here.
Uh, and we trucked back up, and then we were at dinner that night, and I got called out of the tent, and we were at breakfast. Mike calls me out of the dining tent, and he's like, Tendy has it now. He's got to go to the hospital. I'm like, what? And so they're going to put me with this other guy that I don't even know. And I was freaking out. And my coach Mark was there guiding somebody else. And I went in his tent crying, and oh my, all the things. And he's like, this guy is like the next Tendy. Like, this is the best possible scenario for you. Like,
Mhm.
you're going to be fine. And so I go up with Pemba, and I'm with this new guy. I got to get to know him. And we get to camp 2, and I'm really struggling because I'd lost all the acclimatization. So it's like all this, I have to go through all of that again. And then I come out of my tent, and my team now is like in down suits on oxygen, ready to go up. And I'm still on my second rotation. So it was all guys. that I was with, and Tenny's not there, and I'm all feeling sorry for myself and all the things. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then Tenny shows up. So he was only down for 2 days. He didn't even have to go to the hospital. He just went home because he lives there, got
Yeah.
down at normal altitude, and then he comes back up and he's fine. Like the Sherpa people are made different, man.
Yeah.
They're it's incredible. So then I'm like, okay, everything's gonna be okay. And we finished that rotation, went to base camp, and then came back and got to the summit. And we got up to camp. It was the deadliest season on Everest in 2003 or 2023, and a lot of people were dying, and we were seeing, because we were so late in the season, so we were seeing all that carnage, and there was helicopters flying over with bodies hanging down. And I'm like, Teddy, is that person alive? He said, if they're straight up, they're alive and they're being rescued. And if they're hunched over, they're dead. And I saw both. And, you really, really had to lean on him to get me through that, because that was scary. It gets really real when you're seeing dead bodies flying over you. So, he kept talking me off the ledge with that. And we get to Camp 4, and there's a dead body like right on the trail, like right next to me. And, it was a lot of people that went up that didn't have the right support and didn't have enough oxygen. And they were with low budget companies that are popping up. And people don't know any better than to ask, what am I sacrificing for getting the trip for half the price? They don't know. They just go, and you get up there and there's lines of people and you can't control the lines, and especially on the Hillary step, and people are running out of oxygen and dying. And in almost every case it was preventable. Oh, you do your most of your final rotation on oxygen. You start on oxygen at Camp 2, and so everything before then is to get you ready for the summit push. And so
What is
at
the
time,
what does
go
the
ahead.
rotation mean?
A rotation means, so you climb high and sleep low.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Got
So
it.
the first rotation, you go to camp, 1 or 2, and then the next one you go to like towards 3, and then you come back down to base camp and you recover, you eat and sleep for a couple days, and then the final summit push is 1, 2, 3, 4 summit and back down. And um, so once you get on oxygen, and which I had so much anxiety over the mask and claustrophobic, and I had none of that. I was like, give it to me. Like, this is awesome. Like, I feel like I have superpowers on this stuff. This is awesome. Still hard and all the things, but
Yeah.
so I was so strong because I had been down in Kathmandu for a week and got my strength back. It was awesome for me because I felt good. And most people don't feel good at that point. You're trashed. I mean, you're trashed. You've been living in altitude for 2 months and you're exhausted and all the things. And so, it ended up giving me kind of I don't want to say an advantage, but it was good for me because I felt good. We finally get up to Camp 4, and you're in the death zone, and it's exactly like everybody says it is. It's like being on the moon. There's trash everywhere. There's broken down tents everywhere. There's people dying. I mean, it's a very inhospitable place. And I have to tell you this: my mom had passed in February, like 2 months before I left, and she was my biggest cheerleader. And as she's getting sick, I'm trying to train, and I'm flying to see her and feeling so guilty. Like, how could I still go? My mom's dying. She said, you keep training, you go, you keep doing this. I want this for you. And she gave me permission when other people were very judgmental, unfortunately, in my life around that. How could you? It's between me and my mom, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we knew she was going to pass at some point, and I said, where do you want your ashes? And she said, you put them up on top of that mountain. You put me up on top. So she passed, and I had a little vial of her ashes, and that stayed in my backpack for the whole time, the whole 2 months. And I felt like I knew she was with me, like, especially summit night. I could feel her. It was weird. So we're at Camp 4, and just everything's moving really slowly. And we were supposed to be there for like 5 hours and rest, and before we started the summit push, and it starts snowing like crazy. Tenny's like, I've never seen it snow up here. Like, he's been up there 15 times, right? And it's snowing and it's getting worse and like blinding snow and wind. And you're at that point at Camp 4, you're trying to just, you don't sleep at that altitude, you're just resting. I'm trying to eat. I ate some Oreos and and you take whatever you can stomach. Like there's no like healthy eating. It's just calories. Like it doesn't, so like unlimited gummy bears and unlimited whatever won't freeze. And it keeps snowing and we're trying to rest. And I'm thinking, there's no way we're going anywhere tonight. Like it's just no teams are going up the mountain. And then teams started going up and Tenny starts nudging me at 10 o'clock at night. He's like, we're leaving in a half hour. I'm like, what? Because I was kind of hoping we'd have the night.
Yeah.
But the time to that thing is at night so that you hit the summit at sunrise and you get back down before any weather closes in or whatever. And so we get everything ready and we start walking and we're passing people on the rope, which is very cool. Very carefully. Obviously, you have to be really careful when you do that. And it's still snowing and wind, and you can't. All you see is this row of headlights. You have no idea how far anything is. And they kept saying, "We're just got to get to the balcony," which is the only flat spot that's not very big, but it's flat, and that's where you change oxygen and drink something and try to eat. And it's like, get to the balcony again. So finally we get to the balcony and the wind is like just ferocious. Like you can't see and was no stopping. I had 3 Sherpa with me plus Tenny plus me. So it was our little unit of 5 of us moving up this thing. And they were dealing with my oxygen, thank God. They're changing it. They're checking it to make sure it's still on. They're changing the level of how much the flow based on how I'm feeling and how I'm moving, which is, kind of standard protocol over there, thank God, because you don't have any idea what you're doing. I mean, they teach you how to use the oxygen and all those things in case you had to do it, but they're doing all that stuff for you. And so they changed the oxygen. Tenny had black tea, I remember, and just put it up. He's like, pull your mask down. And he just started throwing it in my mouth and got caffeine and I got some gummies or something. And then we kept going. And it was my Garmin it's a satellite device that when I put on the tracking, people from anywhere can see me moving on the mountain, just a little dot. But so it's the middle of the night there, but it's daytime here. And all these people I know are watching this dot move, and everybody knew it was summit night. And I looked down and it's frozen, which has happened before. And I told everybody, like, don't freak out if it stops, because it doesn't mean I'm dead. It means it's probably frozen. But I looked down, it's frozen, and I'm like, Tenny, nobody knows where we are. And we hadn't communicated with base camp. And I was like, getting a little anxious. And he looks right at me and is calm. He goes, I know where we are. We're okay. And it was like, okay, we're just walking uphill. That's all this is. I had to even like put out of my mind that I was actually on Everest because it's so surreal that everything that I had gone through on that expedition, that it was actually happening. And then this calmness comes over me, like more than I've ever felt. That I knew I was okay and I knew we were going to get there. And then this wasn't a voice, but it was this very strong thing comes to me that I need to sell my company. And I had no plans of retiring for at least 5 years, probably 10. I loved what I was doing. I got up every day and, I loved it. And it stayed with me. I mean, obviously I wasn't really thinking about work when I was going up this thing, but it was very strong. And anyway, we keep going. And then we're on the South Summit. So you go to the South Summit and then this Hillary Step, which is it's where the famous picture you see where all the people are in the line and then you go to the true summit. And so the South Summit's just insanely steep. And we're on this thing like 50 degrees and I see this flash and I turn and it's the sun coming up. And so and you can see forever. Like it's this orange line, and blue and red. And I'm like, Daddy. You can't hear each other very well, but He's like, I know. And we stopped, just we're hanging there and we just stopped. There's no taking your phone out at that point. Like
No.
you're getting a picture, but it's in my head forever, you know. And then and when the sun comes out, it's you see where you are and the enormity of what you're doing and the beauty of the world, you know, and it gives you the strength to keep going. And then I start getting super short of breath and weak, and I start like blacking out of nowhere. And I go down on my knees and I'm like, what is happening? My oxygen regulator was frozen. And so I found out in a hurry what it feels like to not have any air up there. Scared to death. And they had, thank God, and this is why you go with these companies. Tendi had extra regulators. The Sherpa had extra regulators because this is a thing that happens at altitude. And so they very quickly got the regulator, got mine off, got a new one on, and all of a sudden I could breathe. And I was like, okay, this is game over now. It was so dramatic. And so I was like seeing stars, and I'm like, this is not good. Like, now what? He's like, we keep going. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I could have died a second ago. Like, I really. And then it happened again. It happened 3 times, but at least the other 2 times it happened, I knew what was happening, you know.
Yeah.
And then we get up to we go through the Hillary step, and there's no line. I mean, there's a couple of people, but there's no line because everybody had already summited. So it was like beautiful. And um, you know, it is knife edge ridge on either side. One side you're dropping down to Tibet, and the other side is Nepal. And like, really, even though you're on a fixed line, there's no room for error. Like you really, and my goggles were freezing and I kept pulling them up, and Tendy's yelling at me to put my goggles back on, even if they're frozen, because you can get snow blind up there really quickly in like 20 minutes of your eyes being exposed at that. And then it's really game over. Then it's life threatening and they can't get you down and whatever. So
Yeah.
dealing with that, and we get up and I see this weather station, which I have read about that, you know, I don't know how long ago, but somebody put a weather station up there, and it's like just this funky looking, almost looks like a big robot. I'm like, what is that? Am I hallucinating? I'm like, oh my God, it's the weather station. Like, I'm close. I was like, yes. And then we get to the summit, and you know, there is a line of people, but we got up there right away, and it's tiny. Like there's not much room up there. But I saw the prayer flags and I knew that was the summit. And you know, there's all these things we have to do. You know, I've got my mom's ashes, we've got all these photos and with the banner and the fundraiser and the team photos and all these things. And so it's very rushed. It's not like this situation, unfortunately. But the first thing is he took me over to this little corner facing Tibet, and most of the other people were facing Nepal. And I got to pack out my mom's ashes, and I released my mom and into China. And I mean, incredibly beautiful experience. So few people get to do that, you know, like, and you know, I'm crying and very emotional and all the things, beautiful. But again, I know we don't have much time. There's people waiting to get up. There's all these things. So we take all the pictures, and we're up there for maybe 10 minutes, I don't know, maybe 15 max. I could have stayed up there for 3 like hours. It was just looking out. It's like, so we're kind of rough, Tenny, like we got to get down. You're also, you know, very conscious of how much oxygen you have left because you've still got to get down. And Tendy kept telling me the whole expedition, the summit is not the true summit. The true summit is when I get you home to your family. That's the goal. It's not the summit. It's getting you home safe. And so that kind of stuck with me. Like, you know, I'm only halfway here.
Yep.
But so we're getting the packs on and getting ready to go down. And Tendy gets behind me. He's like, just look out. And he starts turning me in a circle really slowly. And he's behind me in his Buddha spiritual voice, and he's turning me in a circle, and he's like, look where you are right now. You're on top of the world. Take this in. And it was the greatest gift he could have given me because I took it in, and I didn't have my phone out. There was nothing else to do but take in the experience fully of gratitude. A lot of people ask what my feeling was, like relief, for sure. But just so much gratitude that for my family, for all of my support team at home, for gratitude to God mostly. Like he put me there, and I'm still trying to unpack that. Like why? But I was supposed to be there, and I got there. And yeah, and then so it takes, 2 months to get to the top of that thing, and then it takes 2 days to get down. So
Oh, really?
we turn you're out of there quick. Like
Yeah.
we were back down in base camp within 2.5 days. And then helicopter home. And so I summited on the 23rd and I was home on the 28th. I was
Incredible.
in my house on the 28th, 5 days later. Yeah. Like what just happened to me? And there was a big celebration and people were lined up in the driveway and like just, beautiful, incredible experience, incredibly difficult. There's nothing about that mountain that is easy. We were coming down and the body that was there when we got to Camp 4 was uncovered. When I first saw him, I couldn't see his face or anything. The wind had blown off whatever they had over him, and you could see his face and his hands right here. And I lost it. Like I just lost I just was so, like this guy has a family, this guy has kids, this guy didn't come here to die.
Mhm.
And I was upset, and Tubby came over with the Sherpa and they started praying in Buddha and chanting. And it's the craziest thing is you don't know what they're saying, but you don't need to know what they're saying when they're chanting. It's
Mhm.
incredibly powerful. And yeah, so um yeah, then I got home. Yeah.
Incredible.
Life changed my life.
So, I mean, after that, what do you do next?
Everything's a letdown. Like everything's compared to that.
I know.
Well, I got home and that feeling of selling the company stayed with me, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy to me, and I couldn't tell anybody except my family. I started the process of figuring out who I was going to turn my people over to. It was the most important thing was that they would be taken care of.
Mhm.
They didn't ask for this. They signed up for me, and I'm super close with all of them and their families, and they relied on me. I spent 31 years of my life taking care of that company like I would my kids and my husband. I'm only 5 months into retirement right now, so
Oh,
a big void, a big piece is missing. I have not let myself sit still long enough to embrace it. I just did rim to rim to rim, a double crossing of the Grand Canyon. So I trained super hard for that. I was out in the Tetons doing some rock climbing to prepare for this upcoming expedition that may or may not happen.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of, more time with my son Jacob's in college now, but Jackson's home, and more time with him and more time just to breathe. And so now training without, I don't want to call it the burden of the company, but you know what I mean, has been like,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is incredible. Like, so I don't know what's next. I can't imagine not climbing anymore, even though I promised my husband. But I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I'm so passionate about it. I am the best version of myself when I'm out there, and every time I come home, I'm a better version of myself. I was a better employer when I came home. I was a better friend. I was a better mom. I was a better wife. I was a better everything, because those experiences start changing you and
Yeah.
shaping you and molding you into what I always wanted to become, which was a little less intense, a little more present, um, a little less selfish. Uh, and every time I was able to do that a little bit more. And I don't know why it took that, but it did. And I think I listened to the nudges, and I kept getting them, and the right people kept being placed in front of me, and I kept saying yes when I didn't know, when I was scared, when I was like, what, this makes no sense in my life based on where I came from. And it kept working out. And I was like, okay, that's the definition of blind faith. That's what that means. is, I'm being pointed in a direction for some reason, and I have a choice to make. I can either say no because I'm afraid or because I don't know the outcome, or I can say yes and see what happens. And I've had 100% success rate in saying yes and growing in the process. And, you know, nobody can say to me, I don't have time to fulfill my dream. I mean, I was as stretched with my time as you could possibly be.
Mhm.
There was no extra room, zero. And I was still able to do it. And I see so many women who don't pursue we all have a dream. We all have a thing that, oh my God, I wish I could do that, or I'd like to do that. And so many people don't because of kids, because of time, because of work, because of just do it. Because we all think we have later. Well, what if we don't have later? What if later something else happens that prevents us from doing it? It's hard, it's complicated, it's messy, it's stressful, it's all the things, but there, if you really want it, there is a way.
I guess this kind of goes nicely into the next question, which is like, what words of empowerment would you give other women who might be trying something new or want to stay consistent or, yeah, have that big pie in the sky goal that they're shooting for?
Trust the process. Figure out what the process is from somebody else who's done it, and then do that. It's very simple. And trust it and show up every day, even when you don't want to, because most days you're not going to want to. I didn't want to do that training. Um, I didn't want to be inconvenienced. I didn't want to be cold. I didn't want to blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, do it consistently. Because that was where the magic was as I was doing it over and over and over again, you start figuring things out. You start getting better. You start getting more efficient. You start figuring out what time of the day is better. You start figuring out how to manage your schedule. But if you blow it off and don't do the next thing, then you never learn those things. So, the only way to get to wherever you're going is to just do it a little bit at a time and have faith that listen to the nudge. Like I just believe this in my heart because it just happened to me. We're all given nudges or ideas, and those I believe are given to us from something outside of ourselves, telling us to go do something, and pay attention to that because that's real. I know it is. Um, and the magic on the other side of that is just more than you could ever imagine. Like this was not even about climbing mountains for me. I mean, it was about the person I became in the process of climbing the mountains, you know? And so you don't know where the dream is supposed to lead you or where it will take you. But for me, it's never taken me to a bad place, ever. It's always taken me to a good place, and a better place, and a loving place, and a more connected place, and a place and a version of myself where I can show up better for those around me, you know? What a gift. Versus choosing a life where, and there's nothing wrong with this at all, but choosing a life where it's just, the same thing all the time. And I'm in this rut of my life, and everybody has a choice.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to say?
I had to learn how to not compare myself to others. Like I'm on this journey and everybody's on their own journey. And mine isn't better or worse, or it's just different. And so whatever the journey is supposed to look like for each person, just go for it. I mean, just go all in because you will regret it. And coming from where I came from with almost losing everything and so broken and couldn't get off the couch, laying there in my own vomit again, like almost on the streets. It was that bad. To this life, like I was like, I don't want to regret anything. I want to, and my mom had regrets, and I saw it. I watched it. She worked until she couldn't work anymore, and then she had nothing else in her life. She had no hobbies and no friends and no. She was alone at the end. And I don't want that. I want to get to the end of my life, whenever that is, and say, I lived it. I lived it to the best extent that I could live it. And that looks different for everyone, but life isn't just about working and paying the bills, man. There's so much more if we're open to it. There's so much more. And the growth opportunities are never ending. I mean, as much as I have learned, there's still so much more.
Do you have anything you would like to plug? I know you said you're kind of in between projects.
So the Miracle Ear Foundation, Miracle Ear is the company that I have a franchise in. An arm of that company is the Miracle Ear Foundation, and we give free hearing aids to adults and children that can afford them. And I started with the foundation my first year in the business in 1993. And it is amazing what we do. And we give the gift of sound to people that couldn't afford it and change their lives. And so all of my climbs were fundraisers for the Miracle Ear Foundation, and raised, like you said earlier, $250,000, and super proud of that. And I am still on the board and still involved in that, and just did a fundraiser last Saturday with my family. And so if anybody is listening that has a hearing loss or knows someone that has a hearing loss and financially they cannot afford help, all they need to do is you can go to miracleearfoundation.org, or you can walk in. There's Miracle Ear centers in every city across this country, and you can walk in and ask for an application and talk to the specialists there. Every single office is involved in the foundation, and it's a super easy process. And yeah, please come seek out help. There's no reason to go through your life without hearing the people that you love, and communicating with the world just because you can't afford it. We have a solution for that, and we would love to help.
Awesome. And then if people want to follow you personally, like on your on Instagram or on Facebook, like what's your handle?
Instagram handle is Julie McKelvey 27, and Facebook I think is just Julie McKelvey.
Great.
If they search for me, they'll see a picture of a mountain, and that's me.
Okay.
So
you can follow me personally. That's at Jacalyn Gross, JACALYNGROSS. You can follow UR Sportswear. That's the letter U, the letter R, Sportswear, on all social platforms. And you can check out our products at yoursportswear.com. If you're listening to this and you want to watch the video version, you can go to Your Sportswear's YouTube channel and subscribe. Both the audio and video version of this podcast was produced by Jeremy Canaria and edited by me. Julie McKelvey, thank you so much for being here. This was so inspiring. I can't even tell you. I don't have words. It's incredible.
good. Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad we could work it out. And yeah, best to you moving forward. And thank you for what you're doing with all of this. This platform is amazing to get the word out to people and to hear people's stories. And that takes a lot of work. So thank you for that.